Hi friends, welcome to Scholar. This is Akshaya and I take your medieval history course here. Today is the lesson number 12 of the series and we are going to start with the MCQs lesson today essentially. So this is not a new topic, but we are going to do some previous year's MCQs from the topic that we've covered so far. Also we'll have some practice or the possible MCQs that could be asked from the section that we've covered. So without any further ado, let's get started. So this is the agenda that we are going to cover. We are covering the previous year's MCQs and we are covering some possible objective questions, right? Starting with the question number 1. So the question says, with reference to the economic history of India, the term Aragatta refers to what? This has been asked in the year 2016 UPSC Prelims and the question says, what does the term Aragatta means? And your options are bonded labor, land grants made to the military officers, water wheel used in the irrigation of land, and wasteland cultivated to cultivated land. If you can recall, please try to recall, have we covered this term, Aragatta? Did I show a picture or something? There was a picture that I actually showed, and this we covered under your Cholas topic, wherein I had shown a Persian wheel which was being used for irrigation. Right, so essentially Aragatta is a water wheel which is used in the irrigation of land. So the answer is C. Aragatta means a water wheel, Persian wheel which was used in the irrigation of land. Right? Okay, now the next question. With reference to the Indian history, which of the following is or are the essential elementary elements of the feudal system? Again, a topic that we covered in great detail. With reference to the Indian history, which of the following is or are the essential elementary elements of the feudal system? Basically, the salient features of the feudalism or the feudal system they are asking. You remember I discussed feudalism in great detail and I compared it to how the European concept of feudalism is and what is the difference with the Indian notion of the feudalism and how are the two different. So this is essentially what it is asking. And what are the options that we have? A very strong centralized political authority and a very weak provincial or local political authority. A very strong center and a weak provincial, basically. This is what it says. Next is emergence of administrative structure based on control and possession of land. Administrative structure based on control and possession of land. And third, creation of lord-vassal relationship between the feudal lord and his overlord. Right, so just look at the option number 1, I mean the statement 1, and isn't it just complete opposite to what we had discussed? When I explained feudalism, I essentially said that after the fall of the kingdom of Harsha, there was this in the early medieval ages in India, feudalism was a very strong feature. The first lesson, if you can recall, feudalism was the essential or the elementary feature of the early medieval times. And when I explained the feudalism, I said that what it means is that the center is breaking up and very many smaller kingdoms are coming up. So that is what essentially feudalism was. And the statement 1 that they've given is actually the opposite of what feudalism is. So anywhere you see the statement 1, you can completely delete that one. So we delete A, we delete C, and we do not delete C, we delete A and we delete D, right? So 3 has to be correct because 3 is there in both the options B and C. So 3 has to be correct. Now look at the option number 2. Emergence of administrative structure based on control and possession of land. Did I discuss something like feudalism wherein I said that the provincial, so there's a center and then there are provinces and then there's a governor for each province. He takes care of the land under him. All this we had discussed, right? So this is also correct and 3 is correct. So basically the answer is B. And this was a question asked in the year 2015 in your UPSC exam prelims. Moving on to the question number 3. The Chinese traveler Xuanzang, or different pronunciations. Xuanzang, who visited India, recorded the general conditions and culture of India at the time. So Xuanzang had visited India during the time of, if you can recall, which ruler? Please try to recall. He was during the times of Harsha, right? Who visited India, recorded the general conditions and culture of India at that time. In this context, which of the following statements are correct? Very essential whenever you are solving the previous year's papers for any subject for that matter, make sure that you read the questions very correctly. Sometimes they ask incorrect, sometimes they could be asking incorrect, and then the options are just opposite, the right answers. So be very, very careful, and please highlight, like the way I am highlighting in this slide. Please highlight the correct and what is it asking, eliminate how we eliminated in this slide, like we eliminated the option A and D. This ways I would want you to solve and eliminate your options. So anyway, coming back to the question, when Xuanzang had visited India, he recorded the conditions and culture of India at that time. Which of the following statements are correct in that context, right? So now, please try to recall what we studied during Harsha's times and what did Xuanzang generally said about that time. So the first statement is the roads and river routes were completely immune from robbery. Completely immune from robbery. I don't think we can recall anything where we studied for any emperor that roads were completely immune, right? So this statement 1 we can please eliminate. And then statement 2, as regards punishment for offences, ordeals by fire, water and poison were the instruments for determining the innocence or guilt of a person. Now even if you did not, let's say, know this question, if you look at the statement 1 and 2, there is not really a coherence, because if the roads were complete, there were no crimes, etc., then why was the need for such punishments, etc., right? So you can see that statement 2 is correct and statement 1 is wrong. And lastly, the tradesmen had to pay duties at ferries and barrier stations. This again we discussed. Harsha's time there was trade, and how were the kingdoms flourishing, we discussed with the foreign trades, etc., that there were duties which were to be paid, or the taxes which were to be paid by the tradesmen, and this was essentially a source of income for the empire. So 3 is also correct. That brings us to only one option, which is 2 and 3. Also, let's say even if you did not know 2 and 3 very well, then just by understanding that statement 1 is correct, which is like a giveaway, basically, completely immune, something that extreme, completely immune, that's not really a possibility. So by that you can delete A, you can delete B, and you can delete D, because you have 1 in all of these options, and then you are left with only B. So you see, we have seen this question, which was essentially asked in your Prelims 2013. Moving on to question number 4, asked in 2012, with reference to the guilds or the shrenis. You remember this term, shrenis, guilds of merchants and tradesmen? We discussed, I think in your Cholas topic we discussed this term. Anyway, with reference to the guilds and shrenis of ancient India that played a very important role in the country's economy, which of the following statements are correct? Again, please underline or somehow highlight correct. What are they asking? You need to look, right? So please highlight correct. And then what is it asking? Every guild was registered with the central authority of the state, and the king was the chief admin authority on them, right? So this is right? The guilds we discussed, and when we discussed the role that shrenis or the guilds had to play, during even the Cholas economy we discussed. So something like that. The guild was registered with the central authority, and king was the chief admin authority on them. So this is correct, right? The wages, rules, work, etc. were fixed by the guild. Again, we discussed to the extent that guilds were autonomous in their own sphere of affairs, etc., right? So 2 is also correct. And similarly, the statement 3, which goes, the guild had judicial powers over its own members. This also, we did not really discuss each of these statements and functions, but I did say that the guilds were autonomous to the extent of their own affairs, right? And they had a key role to play in the administration also. So this is how they played that role, right? We discussed during, I clearly remember we discussed during the lesson on Cholas, right? So what does this tell us? 1 is correct, 2 is correct, and 3 is correct, and there's only one option which goes like that, 1, 2 and 3. So the answer is option D. Moving on to the next question, asked in the year 2012 prelims, the Nagara, Dravida and the Vesara. Now these three terms I've discussed over and over again whenever we are discussing the art and architecture of any dynasty. I hope that rings a bell. So a little clue, the Nagara, Dravida and Vesara are related to art and architecture. Then let's see, now look at the options now. What could these three terms be? The three main racial groups of the Indian subcontinent? No. The three main linguistic divisions into which the languages of the India can be classified? No. The three main styles of Indian temple architecture, right? This is what the right answer is. And I've discussed again and again, Nagara is your North Indian style, climaxed under Rajputs, Dravida is your South Indian style, climaxed under your Cholas, and Vesara is your, a kind of you can say a mix of the great features of the Nagara and the Dravida, North and South Indian style of architecture, temple architecture, and Vesara essentially, was started off by your Chalukyas of Badami, and then it climaxed under Hoysalas, and we're going to study all that when we come to Hoysalas later, but we have discussed these three terms. And so your answer is essentially Nagara, Dravida and Vesara, the three main styles of Indian temple architecture. This was a really simple one. Right? Such questions none of us are doing wrong in the prelims, right? Because please remember, in your prelims it's more about not doing the ones which are very, very easy wrongs. If a question is easy, please make sure that you're doing it right, because everybody in the competition is going to be doing them right? Something like this you just cannot afford to do wrong in your prelims, right? Now the next question is, where is the famous Virupaksha Temple located? Now see this question, okay, let's just solve this, then I'll talk about that. Where is the famous Virupaksha Temple located? 2009. The options are Bhadrachalam, Chidambaram, Patadakal and Srikalahasti. We have discussed this. I can give a little clue here. It was Chalukya's dynasty. Chalukya's dynasty. Queen of which king? Vikramaditya II, I guess. You can remember that much at least. I'm sorry. Vikramaditya II. Queen of King Vikramaditya II from the Chalukya dynasty. Okay, so when I say Chalukya, I hope that rings a bell, and that brings you to Patadakal. So this is where this Virupaksha temple is located. Now a little word of caution here. See, in this question the UPSC had originally given an option Hampi, right? But I kept this question deliberately and I changed it a little bit because we haven't yet covered Vijayanagar kingdom, which we're going to cover after your Delhi Sultanate. But because we haven't yet covered Vijayanagar kingdom, and Hampi was actually the capital of the Vijayanagar ruler and was then built by there's another Virupaksha temple, right? So there are two Virupaksha temples. There's one at Hampi, which was built by your Vijayanagar rulers, and there is one at Patadakal. So please remember, the Virupaksha temple that we have spoken of already is the one at Patadakal, built by the Chalukyan queen, right? Moving on to the next question, which is the Ikshvaku rulers of the southern India were antagonistic towards Buddhism. I'll read that again. The Ikshvaku rulers of the southern India were antagonistic towards Buddhism. Antagonistic, do we all understand? Basically, they were opposite, you can understand, or they were against Buddhism. Whatever dynasties we've studied so far, was there any dynasty that we studied which was not tolerant or which was antagonistic towards Buddhism? No, right? So by common sense, you should be able to eliminate this option. But still, just to tell you, where did we study the Ikshvakus? Before Pallavas when I was teaching Pallavas, I remember I spoke of the Ikshvakus, who were probably a local tribe which succeeded the Satavahanas in your south, right? And then finally, when Pallavas overthrew the Ikshvaku's rule, then Pallavas came. But nowhere have we studied something like a dynasty being antagonistic to Buddhism. So by that common sense or logic also, you should be able to eliminate such options, and you will have such statements even in your actual prelims. You see, these are the actual prelims questions that we are solving here. So this was an option which was this was a question which is from a prelims paper, and this was the kind of statement that they formed. So please, employ your common sense a lot while you're solving your prelims paper. There are a lot of statements which are going to be solved only by using your common sense. Anyway, getting back to the question. So the Ikshvaku rulers, we've understood this is a wrong statement. Next statement is the Pala rulers of the eastern India. Palas, does it ring a bell? Where did we study Palas? The Pala rulers of eastern India were the patrons of Buddhism. So Palas were your Palas from Bengal and Bihar. Tripartite struggle, Palas in the east, Rashtrikutas, Deccan, and Gurjar and Pratiharas in the northwest, right? So those Palas, and I remember when I was teaching the Palas, I spoke very clearly that the most notable feature of the Palas is their patronage towards Buddhism. And they built very many Mahaviharas. They had built Odantapuri, they had built Vikramshila, they had built Jagadala, they had built this one more, Somapura, right? So those names are also important. And these are the things that you should remember. Palas, very notable. For instance, for Cholas, we discussed notable features was their local administration, their strong navy, right? Similarly, for Palas, we discussed Buddhism was a very notable feature. So anyway, so that tells us, that discussion brings us to the point that Palas were the patrons of Buddhism. So the statement 2 is also correct, right? So the statement 1 is wrong and 2 is right. And what does the question ask? Which of the following statements given above are correct? Please remember, it's asking correct. So 2 is correct, 1 is incorrect. So we will mark B. And let's say it had asked incorrect. In that case, we would have marked A. This is why I tell you to highlight what it is asking. Let's say it had asked incorrect, and we would have messed up if we would have marked the option B, right? So the answer here is option B. Question number 8, which is been asked in the year 2003. It says, consider the following statements, right? The Cholas defeated the Pandya and Chera rulers and established their domination over the peninsular India. Defeated the Pandyan and Chera in the early medieval times. Any guesses, please? Let's read it again. The Cholas defeated the Pandyan and the Chera rulers and established their domination over peninsular India in the early medieval times. So when we were studying the imperial Cholas of Tanjore, right? These are the medieval Cholas. So when we were discussing the imperial, these are essentially your imperial Cholas. And while I was teaching your imperial Cholas, I said that these Cholas had actually defeated everyone, and then they established their supreme domination. This is essentially what is the crux of the statement. The statement says that Cholas defeated the Pandyas and the Cheras. Pandyas were at Madurai. Cheras were in the Kerala region. They defeated everyone, and they established their domination over the peninsular India. You remember when I was teaching Cholas, I said not just the peninsular India, but even in the Southeast Asia, and even in the Maldives, etc., they had set up their domination. So the statement 1 is definitely correct. Now the statement 2, the Cholas sent an expedition against the Sailendra Empire of Southeast Asia. Basically what I just spoke of, the Southeast Asia, and conquered some of the areas. So this is a statement which is again correct, as I just spoke, that the Cholas, they had a very supreme navy. They had an extremely superior navy in those times, and they were able to send expeditions to Southeast Asia, Sailendra Empire, Sri Vijaya, and this was essentially your areas of Java, Sumatra, Malay, all those areas which are basically, which are these countries? Current day Indonesia, Malaysia. So they had even sent their expeditions there and they conquered some areas there. I had even shown an India map, right? So the statement 2 is also correct by that logic. And what does the question ask? Which of these statements are correct? So basically 1 and 2 both are correct. So the answer here is C. Both 1 and 2. Moving on to the next question, which is a rather simple question asked in the year 2003. We will not do questions from too old papers, but we'll try and solve something not beyond before 2000 we will not solve. And even for your own practice, I wouldn't advise going that far. I would rather advise sticking to questions asked after 2010 specifically. But anyway, just to give you a sense of the kind of questions which are asked, we are solving from this topic, we are solving it until 2000. So let's look at the question. Which amongst the following laid the foundations of the Rashtrikuta Empire? Essentially, the question asked, who is the founder of the Rashtrikuta Empire? Who was the founder? Amogavarsha, Dantidurga, Dhruva, Krishnavan. Now please try to recall. I remember we had built this beautiful chart and I had highlighted certain kings and I said that you should remember these. So when we did that entire highlighting and all that beautification, I spoke Amogavarsha I is a very crucial ruler, but he was not the founder, right? Amogavarsha I was a crucial ruler known for his different contributions, but he was not the founder. Who was the founder? Dantidurga was the founder. Yeah, in fact, his most important contribution to Rashtrikuta is that he founded the empire. Yeah. So yeah, he threw his overlords and he founded the Rashtrikuta essentially from the place called Elaichur, right? Yeah. So this was his most important contribution. And then you have some other king's name. Krishna I was known for what? Now that we have these names here, let's try to exercise our brains a little bit. Krishna I was known for what? He was known for building the Kailashnath temple at Ellora. Friends, please make a different, kings wise, your notes. I want you to make this way that just write the most important contributions and you do not have to remember each and every name, but the most important one, something like building a Kailashnath temple, you should remember. And there are only 3-4 rulers, maximum actually 2 to 4 rulers which are important in each dynasty. Just remember the founder. Just remember someone who has fought some great wars or some great temples they have built, and just remember at the max the last ruler. They will generally not ask, but founder and the most important rulers you should remember for each dynasty. Anyway, moving on, the next question that we have here is on Harsha, right? Emperor Harsha's southward march was stopped on the Narmada river by which king? Pulakeshin I, Pulakeshin II, Vikramaditya I, Vikramaditya II. So that is for sure that he was a Chalukyan ruler, right? That much we can remember also, because Chalukyas was a strong, formidable power in the Deccan region during the times of Harsha. But anyway, coming back to the question that we need to solve right now here, Harsha's southward march. So I spoke of when Harsha became the Lord of the North, he then wanted to capture the southern region also. So then he started an expedition or a march southwards, but he was then stopped and Harsha was, never defeated really by any other king, but he was stopped he was defeating all the kings, right? But then I said that there was one king who was able to defeat Harsha, and I clearly pointed out that name, and that was Pulakeshin II. Please remember Pulakeshin II. In fact, Pulakeshin II is the most important Chalukyan ruler. That much also we should remember, right? Pulakeshin II was the most important Chalukyan ruler and he was the one who defeated Harsha. And then what was the title that Pulakeshin II took? Dakshina Pathnatheshwar. Right? Dakshina, Lord of the South, basically. Dakshina Patheshwar. These titles also sometimes they are important. You should remember, right? After defeating Harsha on the banks of river Narmada. So we've discussed some 10 questions from the previous year's papers of the UPSC Prelims. Now I've also put in some practice questions, for your practice. and we're going to do a lot more of them as the course progresses. But for now, let's just look at few of them. What is the correct chronological order of the coming of following Chinese pilgrims? This is an important question that I want you to remember. What is the correct chronological order? What was the order in which they visited, basically, is what it asks, right? So, Xuanzang. When did Xuanzang came? During Harsha, right? Yijing came after Xuanzang. We haven't talked about it, but he was another Chinese monk who had visited Nalanda, but he came after Xuanzang, right? And Fayan, you must have studied, or you will study in your ancient history course. He visited during Chandragupta too, right? But this is an order that, is remember from your exam perspective, and you should keep in mind. I'll tell you a little trick here to remember this. Just remember the order in which the starting alphabets of their names occur is the order in which they came, basically. So, sabse pehle Fayan, right, starting with an F, then Xuanzang, H, and then Yijing. The pronunciations are a little different than what how we spell them, but the correct Chinese pronunciations are slightly different. But anyway, just to not confuse you any further, I'm just going to tell you that please remember by the starting. So F comes first of all, Fayan came first, then Xuanzang, and then came Yijing. So what is the order? 3, then 1, then 2. Where do we have this? 3, 1, 2. So this is your option C. So please remember, FHI, the order in which the alphabets appear is the order in which the Chinese pilgrims, they visited India. Okay, the last question, I think, just second last question. Mihir Bhoja, consider the following statements. Mihir Bhoja was the greatest ruler of the Pratihara dynasty. This is right. We discussed. Mihir Bhoja was the most celebrated ruler of the Pratiharas, and there was another Bhoja who was the most celebrated of the Paramaras, right? So Mihir Bhoja, this option is right. The Rashtrikuta king Amogha Varsha wrote Kaviraj Marga, the earliest Kannada work on poetics. This is also right. We discussed in great detail. Kaviraj Marga, Amogha Varsha had written. This was one of his most important. Amogha Varsha, please remember, Ashoka of the south, right? He was doing all peaceful works, and he was writing, and he was a patron of Sanskrit and Kannada. There was another work which he had written in Sanskrit. I want you to remember that yourself, right? And yeah, so in this question, both of these statements are correct, and 1 and 2. So the option is C. Great. Lastly, the question number 3, which says match the following. So Kudavolai, we discussed, we had an entire slide on this. Kudavolai was a, these are all terms related to your cholas. This is a clue. So we need to use our brains in that direction. Now please think. Kudavolai was a system. Brahmadaya village exclusive assembly, no. Agricultural class of people, no. Lottery system for the member, yes. You remember there was these names written on leaves, and then they were put in a pot, and then a child would come and pick up. That was the lottery system for the member election. So A is 3. Actually, you can just directly solve it right that, because there's one option which has A as 3. But just read the rest. Let's just read rest of the options also. Ur is a Brahmadaya village exclusive assembly. That was a Mahasabha. 2 types of assemblies we discussed, Ur and Mahasabha. So Ur was a non-Brahmadaya village assembly. Mahasabha was a Brahmadaya village assembly, and then Valangai was a agricultural class of people. Great. Yeah, so your option is D. A 3, B 4, C 1, and D 2. Valangai, Idangai. Other one was your artisans and merchants class, right? In the Chola society we discussed, this was that supra caste kind of a unique structure which had come up during the Cholas, right? So I think this is the last question. Yes, so Great. I hope this lesson had helped you in understanding the kind of questions that you can expect for your prelims paper. And also, I would suggest as an exercise to please start looking at, solving the previous year's questions from the topics that we have covered. And in general, you can start solving some practice questions. Scholar will also provide those, test series. So you can also, subscribe to one of those test series and start solving the MCQs type of questions in order to, train your brain to solve the MCQs kind of questions. So that's all we have for today, and thank you so much for watching. And for more such videos for your UPSC preparation, please log on to our website scholar.com. Thank you.